loud. And then Andrew or Steph, as people come in, if I don't see them, let me go ahead and make you, Andrew, a co-host. Okay, you should have co-host permission. Great. All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this exclusive C70 member briefing ahead of the May 20th primary election. My name is Tanisha Beju, Program Director here at Committee of 70, and I am thrilled to be joined by my colleagues, Andrew McGinley, our VP of External Affairs, and Stephanie Rio, our Director of Advancement. Tonight, we're going to be walking through what's on the ballot, including the district attorney and city controller contest, the judicial elections, the local election board seats, as well as ballot questions that could shape city policy. Whether you're a first-time primary voter or a long-time Election Day regular, our goal is to help you feel informed and confident before heading to the polls. We'll make sure to leave time for Q&A towards the end, so feel free to drop your questions in the chat as we go. And thank you again for being a part of this work. Your participation truly helps strengthen civic engagement and good governance here in Philadelphia and across the Commonwealth. Before we dive into the full discussion, I'd like to hand it over to Steph for a few words and then to Andrew for a quick welcome.
Great. Thank you, Tanisha. Hi, everyone. My name is Steph Rio. I am the Director of Advancement at Committee of 70. And it's a pleasure to welcome you tonight to this members-only briefing. This is one of the many exclusive events that we have designed for our members and for our membership program. And your support directly obviously makes programs like this available to individuals like yourself. So we are very grateful for your membership and for your commitment to strengthening democracy in our region. We have also recently expanded our membership benefits. So if you have not had a chance to check those out, please do so on our website. I'll put that in our chat in a moment here. But we're really excited about what we are offering this upcoming year as being part of our community of members here at Committee of 70. And then if you find tonight's programming, this briefing, this members-only briefing valuable and helpful, please help us spread the word. We would love for other people in your own networks to get involved with us as a member and take advantage of all of the different resources, programming, and exclusive opportunities to connect with our experienced staff like this evening. So if that is something that you feel comfortable sharing on LinkedIn or Instagram or anywhere else, please feel free to do that. Again, I'll drop that information into the chat here. And thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate your time and energy. Back to Tanisha.
All right, we need to hear from the wonderful Andrew McGinley. Would you like to say a few words before I start grilling you about all of these races?
I would love to. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. As everyone said, this is I feel like Tanisha and I are the right people to talk to about these topics. As someone who spent a lot of time working on judicial elections and understands the court system, and Tanisha, who has served as an elected poll worker for years now, we really know the ins and outs of these local races and how important they are. But also, I think both of us would recognize how difficult it is to get information at times and to understand, like, what's the difference between Court of Common Pleas and municipal court and a judge of elections? So we're here to help you navigate that and understand those differences. And I'm just happy to be here with my good friends Tanisha and Steph, as always.
All right, let's dive in. And we're going to start with the DA's race, of course. Definitely one of the most influential public offices that we have, setting priorities on prosecution, public safety, criminal justice reform. So this year, we have two Democratic candidates. We have incumbent Larry Krasner and former Judge Pat Dugan. And they have definitely garnered their fair share of headlines this election season. Could you, with all that noise that people might have heard these last few weeks, can you help us know as voters, how do we what should we be considering as we attempt to differentiate these two candidates? And that would be Democratic voters, of course, since this is a primary. There's no Republican candidate, so there won't be that option on the Republican ballot. Of course, our independent friends, non-affiliated folks, they'll be able to vote on ballot questions, but not on candidates. So for the Democratic voter, we have two candidates. How do we tell the difference between the two?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And this race, I've been paying a lot of attention to it. It is sort of the big show in town this election season. Because in part because it's the most high profile office. It's an office that impacts everyday life for Philadelphians in all neighborhoods and all communities in a lot of different ways. I mean, the top prosecutor role is incredibly important, has a big impact on public safety and security and sort of how people feel about the city. And they also have a lot of discretion in sort of how they manage their office. They're an independently elected office. So this is totally separate from the mayor's administration and the police force. And they bring to the table different perspectives, right? Different candidates. In the past, we've seen, I feel like, more of a difference between the district attorney Krasner and his opponents in some ways. When he ran for the first time, he was really running as part of a national movement for what people refer to as like progressive prosecutors, right? So they were looking at criminal prosecution from a different perspective. And it makes sense if you look at his resume, right? He came from the Defenders Association, so the Public Defender's Office, and then was a criminal defense attorney for a long time, and really focused on equity and racial justice in a lot of the work he did. And he's not without his critics, of course, right? He's made choices that have been controversial and not popular with a lot of different people. Judge Dugan, in some ways, is navigating like a somewhat middle road, right? Not the historically typical, like tough on crime, everyone needs to go to jail perspective that you might expect from a district attorney in some ways. He has not sort of voiced that. He recognizes that the criminal justice system in the United States has its shortcomings and issues. He's been pretty public in support of some of the stuff that actually District Attorney Krasner put into place in terms of conviction overview and looking at past cases and trying to make sure that the office is run with integrity. But there's a philosophical difference between the two of them. It's just not that wide chasm that we've seen in the past. So he's, basically coming to the office with a slightly different perspective, more of like a mainstream, more moderate Democrat in terms of like what he's focused on and what he's talking about. But in some ways, they're both committed to, publicly committed to doing a lot of the same things, right? Making sure the city is safe, making sure the office is run with integrity. We're not seeing that sort of wide, like, complete difference of opinion. So it's tough for voters.
Mhm.
I'm actually, I'm a registered Democrat. I'm not going to hide that for purposes of this conversation. So I'll be voting in that election. And I'm not sure where I would vote, right? I think a lot of us are still trying to make those determinations about what sort of philosophy and what we want to see for the city moving forward. Do we feel like we're heading in the right direction? Do we feel like we need a change? Because it is such an important office.
Yeah, that is definitely in the election briefing conversations that I've had with voters, I've definitely told them to lean on voting their values and
Yeah.
their style. And so we've gone through the different roles of the DA office. It's something that you feel like, many of us have gone to the School of Law and Order, and have the advanced graduate level, like the SVU version of Dick Wolf's whole university system. So we feel like we know it, but it's really important to think through whose approach mirrors your values. So whether that has to do with different levels of reforms, or if that has to do with victims and witnesses, how they're treated. As a former educator, it's really important to me how young people are treated in the system. And so making sure to learn about both candidates in terms of their approaches and styles. One of the things, to plug a friend of 70, We had CityCast Philly's host, the podcast host, Trinae Nuri, hosted one of our events in the fall, and her podcast has had both Krasner and Dugan on recently. So if you'd like to hear from both candidates, I highly recommend those podcast episodes. Also, C70 recently co-hosted or hosted a forum for the DA candidates with WHYY and the Philly Bar Association. You can find a recording of that on WHYY's YouTube as well as their Facebook.
I think there's also our friends at Word Radio have an event. When is it? I apologize. I should have had this pulled up.
I'm sorry. I know I didn't tell you I was going to plug our friends.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. It's actually, I believe, right now. I'm sorry. So they have an event with both candidates going on right now on Word. But that will be recorded and reposted. You're going to be seeing, for those who have televisions, you're going to be seeing a lot of TV ads in the next couple of weeks. So there's a lot of money going into this race, less than we've seen in the past so far. But I do think that you're going to be sick of seeing those ads, probably the most.
Gotcha. All right. I feel good with DA. Are we good to move to city controller?
Yes, the forgotten important office, the incredibly important but often forgotten office.
So exactly. And so with the election briefings that I do, like in person with the whole slide deck and everything, I have learned so much about the city controller's office. Now, Democratic voters, they will see the incumbent on their ballot. There is one Democratic candidate, Christy Brady. They may know her name because she won a special election after the former controller, Rebecca Reinhart, resigned to run for mayor. So Christy Brady has 2 years of experience. She's the incumbent. And then Republicans will see one candidate, that's Ari Petronis. I hope I pronounced his last name correctly. That will be the one candidate on that ballot. So Andrew, there's just the single candidate. So it's more of like you choose to vote for that candidate or not. So instead of focusing on the people themselves the way we did with Krasner and Dugan, can we shift to focus just like on the office itself and help voters understand what are the roles and responsibilities?
Sure.
Or like, what is the crash course right before
You have 3 minutes.
city controller?
Back in 2009, Committee of 70 put out a report basically saying we should get rid of our row offices, right? Row offices are like our register of wills, our city commissioners, our sheriff. There's a lot of these different independently elected offices, and the two that were not included were the district attorney and the city controller, right? Because these roles are so important. The controller is our independent financial watchdog, right? So they are sort of, in some ways, a check on the mayor, who has a lot of discretion in terms of spending, through the city budget process, but making sure that, the money is being spent the way it's appropriated by the city council, making sure that funds aren't being overspent, and then auditing programs to look at how money is being spent. They don't set the city budget, so they don't have a role in that area. They're not setting policy, but they help to make sure the money is spent legally and effectively. And their work is really important because they uncover, or they have historically uncovered, a lot of information that was relevant to the public. The other piece is that we've seen sort of not a shift, but more proactive roles from the city controllers in the last couple of years, where they spend more time explaining a lot of this stuff. Explaining, Rebecca Reinhart, when she was the city controller, had set up she had a dashboard for gun violence in the city, which at the time was at record highs, right? So that was a really useful tool, but also a breakdown of the city budget. So you can see per person how much of your money goes to different programs. So we've actually continued that with our partners at the Philadelphia Citizen because we think that that's such a useful tool. So they can have this public education role in addition to this watchdog role. And the watchdog role is so incredibly important.
I think at least maybe the last year or so, the controller's office has been mailing out like a summary report. And so I often like will hand those, like have copies of those for
Yeah.
people to look at. It's like, if you see these come in the mail, not everyone loves paper mail, but I do. I love to see something in the mail and information, and to have something physical to look at. So definitely look out for those updates from the city controller's office. Is there anything about either of the candidates that we should know outside of just like the office itself?
Nothing is like specifically coming to
Yeah.
mind since they're not really like running for office. But the one thing I want to note is like we have seen, I don't want to keep talking about the sheriff's office, but we talk about the sheriff's office a lot.
Me
The
too.
controller's office a couple years ago is an example of like one of these really important things.
Mhm,
They audited the sheriff's office armory, right? Their gun.
mhm, mhm,
And what they found was there were really bad controls in place to make sure guns, firearms were being deployed to the right people, being secured appropriately, being tracked appropriately within the office. And the control in the sheriff's office, based on that audit, came up with recommendations. I believe they signed a memorandum of understanding for like how this should operate moving forward. But like in addition to this financial watchdog role, that like programmatic watchdog, like what
mhm.
could be more important than tracking firearms in the city of
Yeah,
Philadelphia, right? Like
absolutely.
such a high stakes thing. And like that audit uncovered a really bad situation that, based on reporting, we've seen it's been improved dramatically.
Mhm.
But it's the sort of thing that like without an independent watchdog, that information may never have come to light, right? The public might not ever know that. And it's just a really important office, not just for our dollars, but also for our quality of life.
That's so, I love that um focus on the watchdog and the independent nature, because that's a wonderful transition into our ballot questions,
Yeah.
where that is that's two components that we'll be chatting about. First ballot question has an oversight component. So there's going to be three ballot questions. They topically relate to the Office of Homeless Services, the Housing Trust Fund, and then the Board of Prison Oversight. So we'll be talking about those three ballot questions. The first one would create a new office, the Office of Homeless Services Ombudsperson. And it comes in the wake of allegations of 15 million being mismanaged, overspent during the pandemic between 2020, 2023, and then a delay in payments to nonprofits that were providing emergency services and shelters. So I believe the council member that sponsored this was Council Member Gilmore Richardson. Why, Andrew, can you give us some background of like what would this new office do? Because it's not replacing the current Office of Homeless Service. What is an ombudsperson?
Yeah.
And like that's the first one. And
Yeah, it's a big
I'm
one.
used to like ombudsman, and so like that one rolls off the tongue. The person kind of like trips me up. But what would that office do? And if you happen to know, like, what is its power? Is it, and does it have enforcement? Is it advisory? So, can you give us some insight?
Yeah. So this came out of, as you mentioned, there was this $15 million overspending, which is like a ton of money, right?
Mhm.
But the way a lot of our services for people who are homeless are contracted to nonprofits, right? So like it's not necessarily that if they're experiencing homelessness or they need emergency shelter, they're not going to a city-owned facility, right? They're going to a nonprofit organization that has a contract with the city. And what we saw was there was like a lack of oversight there. There was a lack of oversight in two ways. One, no one was checking to make sure we weren't completely overspending, right? And that was the sort of the initial shock that a lot of people saw. But one of the things that the council member Gilmore Richardson also brought up in that is that the quality of services people were getting were bad, right? People were not getting the sort of help that they needed in these emergency situations. And many of the nonprofit partners were not getting paid on time, right? So there was just a number of different problems in a number of different directions. And city council has, and they have, right, appropriate, investigate, legislate. Those are their three roles. But there are limits, right, to like how much time they can investigate these things. So the idea with this ballot question is to add another layer of oversight in our homeless services. So this person who's an ombudsperson, I guess I should define that term.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah, an ombudsperson is an individual appointed to investigate complaints against an institution, right? So their job is to really track what's happening. And so in this case, the OHS Office of Homeless Services ombudsperson would be tasked with tracking what's happening within the Office of Homelessness Services, investigating complaints. So if an issue comes up either from a person experiencing homelessness or from a nonprofit partner that's providing services, this person, whoever, if this ballot question passes, would have the authority and the responsibility to investigate, right? So they'll be able to dig in and look at what's actually happening in these situations, work within the office to create a solution to it, right? So that would be like your
Okay.
first goal, to work within the office, to work within city government to say like, what's actually happening here? Like, are these, payments not going out on time, whatever the issue is, right? They would have the ability to do that, but also to advocate for the people experiencing homelessness, right? To advocate to the office, to advocate to the mayor's administration, and to advocate for city council. So they'll have like an official role to be sort of the voice of people who are interacting with this office. And they'll have that investigative role so they can investigate specific stuff, but then also advocate for solutions. And that's a really important piece. So they could make recommendations to city council saying, this is, what we're seeing, this is how you fix this, because some things are going to require legislative action. It might not just be the office isn't doing things we like. They might not have the ability to do things the way that they want it to be done. And this person would be like they're, just an important advocate both for the office, for the people, and for council. So everyone is being served appropriately, and we're spending our taxpayer dollars appropriately.
One quick question. On our 70 website, we have our voter guide 2025. All the way at the bottom, we have these ballot questions so that people can not only like see the question again, and then the plain language that's included, but we also include like 70 says, just like if you vote yes, like what does it mean?
Yeah.
These ballot questions, because they relate to people experiencing homelessness, affordable housing, people who are justice impacted, it feels like even more compelling to say yes, to vote yes. Many people feel that way already just because the language, the technical language that's used in writing the questions. But why might like a reasonable person like pause on saying yes to this question, to voting yes?
Yeah, that's a good question. We'll talk about most of these questions we haven't taken a position on as an organization, to be clear. Like we don't have a take on this beyond explaining this question. I guess the main thing, someone could look at this and say like, why do we need it, right? This office should just be managed appropriately, without this additional layer of oversight. And this will be a person who will have a salary and who will have, pretty broad authority. They'll be able to subpoena records and compel testimony. And those are really, it's a powerful role. And you could, if you were opposed to this, or, you might be thinking like, why do we need this? Shouldn't these structures of government already be addressing this? And I don't think that's like a crazy, unreasonable position for anyone to take. I've said that in a way that feels like really extreme.
No, I think
This
that
is
makes
another one where like, I don't know how I'm gonna vote, which is
yeah.
fun and rare for me. So I think
That's why
it's a reasonable question. The other thing I would add is that some other cities have also done this. New York City has one, San Diego has one, and a couple of other places around the country. So it's not a Philly specific thing. I think it's difficult for government to be both the service provider and evaluate itself in what is a difficult situation, right? Like these services are emergency services often. for people who are in really bad spots. So it's a difficult role for government to play, both as like the authority and the person who should be making sure it's running correctly.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because I think these questions are definitely ones where once people understand what is being asked, then you can have really robust, wonderful conversations. And I do with voters when I'm going out. Not everyone agrees and automatically says yes. And it's really wonderful once we get past that layer of not understanding to be able to have these types of conversations. And I think you definitely see that in the next question. So the second ballot question is about the Housing Trust Fund. And it would require that the developer payments that go into the city's mixed income housing bonus program would go entirely into the housing.
So technical, yes.
Yeah. So before we, like, as you read through that question, the first one with the Office of Homeless Service Ombudsperson, once you get past the name, then the rest of it, the way the ballot question is written, it tells you what their responsibilities will be. For this housing trust fund, though, what I found has been really helpful, and I'd love, Andrew, if you can walk us through this, is first making sure it's clear what the housing trust fund is, because no matter where I go in the city, even if there are people who would really benefit from the housing trust fund, sometimes I need to just spend some time being like, ooh, let me tell you about this piece here. So first, let's do what the housing trust fund is. And then next, in a very basic way, talk about how developers currently are paying. So into that mixed income housing program that I talked about, and that'll get us back to the question itself. So housing trust fund, what is it? And then what's going on with developers?
Sure. Yeah, this is like a highly technical ballot question, but it's important. And in some ways, people might think, like, aren't we already doing this? The Housing Trust Fund is the city's fund that's dedicated specifically to building and supporting and maintaining affordable housing, right? So this is not market rate, development that happens across the city. This is programs that will build housing or provide funding to folks to ensure that their home stays, safe and like a place that they can continue to live. So it spends money in a couple of different ways. There's actually a great report that office issues that like details, it's on the city website, details exactly where that money goes. And it's an important program, right? Because affordable housing is a long-term issue for the city and for actually most cities in the country.
Mm-hmm.
The mixed income bonus program that this question is sort of about, since 2018, developers who are building housing can build more housing, right? Denser housing, so more units in a property, in a square foot, in whatever the square footage is, if they contribute money to the housing trust fund. So it's almost like a payment in lieu of a building or building affordable housing in some ways. It's like a way to think about it, right? This building, it doesn't make sense to build affordable housing in it, so I'm going to give some money to the city so they can do it elsewhere. Is the theory behind it. What a lot of people thought, is that money comes in and it goes from developer. I'm going to build this big building, and it goes into the housing trust fund. That's not how the money works, right? That's not how the money flows. The money actually comes in and it goes into the city's general fund, which is how we spend all of our money. And so what this ballot question would do, and then the city spends money on affordable housing in a lot of different ways from a lot of different revenue sources. City money goes to affordable housing and it goes into the housing trust fund or to other programs. That is all like a lot. I recognize it's complicated.
No, but it totally makes sense. Like, definitely, I mean, for myself here in South Philly, like I drive along Washington Ave, you see so much housing going up and you see the prices of those. Or when I visit my mom in West Philly, she lives right in University City, you see all of that. And so it definitely, I think the assumption had been like, maybe developers aren't doing anything for affordable housing. And so this question is saying that the payments going to, instead of going split into the general fund and then some to the housing trust fund,
it would all go immediately into the housing trust fund.
Okay.
And so the idea is that it takes away the discretion from the city, right? It's not up to the city to determine. If that money comes in through that program, it goes out into the housing trust fund. It's a very direct route rather than having it go into the general fund and then be appropriated by city council in conjunction with the mayor on determining how much money goes where.
Gotcha. So this one again kind of feels like, of course we want more money for affordable housing. So why would a reasonable person say no, vote no to this ballot question?
I think we have like a good example of a reasonable person in our director of finance, Rob DeBow for the city. He's a reasonable person. And basically the mayor's administration has opposed this plan. And their situation is like they don't want the discretion taken away, right? They want to be able to make the determination. That's a reasonable person's take. I'll say that much.
All right. Awesome. Last one. So sorry. Dog is running past. She is not a reasonable person.
We both have unreasonable dogs.
She has lots of feelings about affordable housing. Last question. This is one that we do take a position on. So ballot 3 is proposing to create an independent prison oversight board and office. This comes after, this one almost needs no introduction, just like the other 2 issues that we as everyday citizens can see in our city. We've definitely seen that there has been a crisis in our jails related to staffing shortages, something of close to like 800 unfilled positions, which is just causes so many issues.
I apologize. I have to step away for 1 second while you continue to introduce this.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this initiative here, we are trying to replace the board that we currently have. One of the things that I'm going to have Andrew walk us through would be with this new oversight board and office. How are the 9 people on the panel going to be chosen? Generally, there would be 4 chosen by the mayor, 4 chosen by council president Kenyatta Johnson, 1 person chosen by city controller. But then what goes into that? I'd love to hear Andrew give me that background. So I don't know if you heard Andrew, but I did the breakdown too. And then also I'm very interested too in knowing, I know the requirements will be that they're city residents, that they don't currently work for prisons, police, sheriff, and that at least 1 person needs to be a formerly incarcerated person. So why do we need to replace this board? What will the office be doing? I'm very interested to see from your perspective, like why is 70 supporting?
Yeah, we're supporting this for a couple of different reasons. One, because of the state of the city's jails. And we'll just be honest about that. Like we have seen horror stories coming out of our jails, and just because someone's in jail doesn't mean that they don't deserve to be in a safe place and a protected place to have their rights protected. And we've seen lots of reports and audits about that. So like the stakes are high. We want to make people who are interacting with the prisons in Philadelphia, we want to make sure that they're safe and that their families can feel comfortable knowing that while they may be in an unfortunate situation or a situation they wish they weren't in, it's not a really horrible situation. The other piece that I think is really important is that this sort of model is not uncommon, right? Within Pennsylvania law, state law, Philadelphia is unique in some ways because we have what's called a home rule charter, which allows us to design a government that works, for us, right? We're a city and a county at the same time. We're much more densely populated than lots of parts of Pennsylvania. But under state law, every county has a board that has a similar function, right? If they don't have a home rule charter, they have a prison oversight board. It's a slightly different structure, but a lot of the same responsibilities because we recognize that in some ways there's not like a great constituency, a great group of support for people who are in jail. And so this board would be an advocate for those people. It would be making sure that the prisons are safe, So they'll be monitoring jail conditions and in reviewing and investigating complaints, similar to what we've saw with the Office of Homeless Services, in the whole public monthly meeting. So people who can bring things forward, right? There's a lot of engagement between this board and the public because so many people are impacted by this system.
Mm.
And they'll have the authority to investigate. Some of the details are still being worked out because of the way, council will have the authority to empower the board in some ways, but the intention is for them to have the ability to do like unplanned visits, which is obviously a really important tool. It's hard to audit an office if every time you go, they know you're coming, right? Like, so the idea is that like this board would be able to go to the jails and have access to the jail, to be able to go through their facilities and make sure that they can see things, on a day-to-day basis. What are people experiencing within the jail?
That is, I almost like hesitate to ask the question I've asked for the other ones, but I should. So why would a reasonable person vote no on this measure? Even with our like persuasive, stamp of approval as
Yeah.
a nonpartisan, like government watchdog, why might someone just not be in support of this ballot measure?
I guess they can make the argument that like this oversight should be happening in some ways already, and it is, right? Like we know about the issues within the jails because the oversight is happening, but the ability to like really investigate and solve those problems is where sort of the rubber meets the road. So I guess you could say like, oh, do we need another level of oversight that's like outside the regular structures or the current structures of our city charter? And obviously Committee of 70, we think that this is a good thing, right? We want to make sure that these people are protected. So that's sort of where we have come down on it. But it will cost money. It will spend taxpayer dollars, right? You're going to have investigations cost money.
And time
And time.
and effort and
Right. And so like if you just think we are spending too much money, you might just want to say like, oh, we don't need another thing, I guess would be the opponent's position on it. And look, like that's a philosophy that people hold, and it's not a crazy one. You know, at 70, we really looked at this hard because we don't take a position on everything, right? We try to make sure we stay sort of within our realm. But the rights of people who are experiencing or who are within the city's jails are something that we're really concerned with. And we want government to be transparent and accountable. This is a huge expenditure of taxpayer dollars. If you're worried about money being spent, one thing you could say is like the settlements that come out of abuses that happen within jails are huge expenses for the city. And the other piece that I have left out thus far, which I feel horrible about, is that like there are dedicated employees who are working in these jails, which are difficult places to work. And we want to make sure that they're protected as well, right? They're working really hard. They're completely understaffed within the jails. And so like we need another layer of oversight, is our perspective.
Lovely. All right, we have a few more races, and these, when I talk about the judicial races in my voter presentations, I very much lean into making sure that people can differentiate the different levels of court. As a former history teacher myself, this is never something that I went over with my students. We definitely lean more into like executive and legislative. So I would love to to introduce each level. So I'll start with
Sure.
municipal court, give a quick overview, and then if you could let us know like who's running or what should we know about the people who are running, and most importantly, since there are many candidates, where can we go to find out more? So that, as I always say with my voters, like we have to vote our values, and so what are the tools and resources that we can do that with?
Yeah.
We'll move through starting with municipal courts. So if we think about those like little triangles of like the levels of everything, municipal courts at the bottom. It is Philadelphia court. It's our local court with 27 judges. We're going to be voting for up to 3 judges here. And this court is the court that handles that processes all of the arrests, right? Like on the criminal level.
Yeah, like the first sort of,
Yeah.
then it moves into
And
commonplace.
then it moves up. There's also on a civil level, there's like the small claims court, disputes with landlords, tenants, and then there's the traffic division, which doesn't handle the major issues of like DUIs, but like the vehicle infractions, like the smaller level.
Eating, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so municipal court, these are judges who are running for a 6-year
Yep.
term versus the rest of the pyramid, the court system. They are all going to be 10-year
Yep.
terms. So last thing for me, for municipal court, there are only going to be candidates on the Democratic ballot. And so for Democratic voters, they'll be able to vote for up to 3 Republicans. And of course, independents will only see the ballot measures that we just talked about. But for these Democratic candidates, what should we know about the people who are running for municipal court? This one has had a little bit more in the news, so people like might have heard about this one. And then for those of us who do not have your level of legal expertise, where can we find out more information?
Yeah. The one thing I'll add is like municipal court is a Philadelphia specific court, right? Other counties don't have it. What they have is like a district justice. So it's a slightly different model in the city because of the size of the city and the nature of the stuff that comes before it. We used to have a separate traffic court, which was like a hotbed of just mismanagement and corruption. It was so terrible. This was not that long ago. I remember I got a ticket once. I did run a stop sign in my youth, and I had to go to traffic court. And it was a wild experience. So the municipal court, you would still be like those traffic violations going through there instead of going through the separately elected traffic court. But these judges have really important roles. And I think one of the things that I loved about your explanation is like, when you talk about these courts, we try not to say like this is lower and that's higher, right? Like this is the first court and they have specific jurisdiction that's really important and affects a lot of our lives, right? Like if you're being evicted, you may only be dealing with municipal court the entire time. Finding out about who's running for judges is a really big challenge, right? And that's one of the reasons at C70 and a lot of other organizations we work with, we've long advocated for getting rid of judicial elections. And we think that merit appointment, similar to what you have on the federal level, would be a better model for this because it removes a lot of the politics. But there are backups, right? Because we haven't gotten there yet and people need to know who they're voting for. And so locally, the Philadelphia Bar Association plays a really, really important role in this work. Evaluating candidates, and they spend about 19,000 hours a year investigating judicial candidates. And the people doing those investigations are some of them are judges, some of them are lay people. Actually, our president and CEO, Lauren, is on the Judicial Commission at the Bar Association, which is great. But many of them are like attorneys who are practicing in these courts every day, who are maybe high-level attorneys or more junior people who really know these courts in and out, right? So it's a really robust, diverse group of people, and they look at everything from the judge's past experience before they were running to their writing. They talk to, at minimum, 20 witnesses, 20 references. And actually, to get even more detailed, like it's the candidate can name 12 and then they have to find an additional 8 who are like off-book references. And they do a really thorough evaluation. And when I talk to people about these races, because a lot of people come to me and say, oh, you're a lawyer, you work in, democracy, right? Like what should I do? And I'm like, there's no way I could independently evaluate all these people. And so I always direct people and have for years directed people to the Bar Association. And what they do is they give a pretty basic rating. It's not recommended, recommended, or highly recommended. And that is your most useful tool. And you can find those ratings. We have them on our ballot. They're built into our ballot guide or our interactive voter guide, I'm sorry. Or you can just go to electqualifiedjudges.com and there is a list. And it's a very simple, like red, green, good, bad kind of setup
Mhm.
to try to simplify this, because it would be impossible for an average citizen to get this kind of information otherwise.
That's awesome. I don't know how else I would be able to. I remember in the fall of 23 when I had like written out my whole list of judges that I was going to vote for. I use obviously our interactive tool, but I had handwritten it and I knew who was highly recommended. And then I left the piece of paper at home since I'm
No.
a poll worker. I had like my big box of materials. I was like running to my local rec center to get there right at 6. And I was like, how am I going to vote? I don't know these people's names. I researched them. I felt good. And so having something like the bar to be, I mean, I ran back and got the paper.
Yeah.
But in a pinch, it's like going to the Philly Bar, the Judicial Commission, using our interactive voter tool to see the recommendations. And then if someone, correct me if I'm wrong, but if someone opts not to participate in the review, then they'll be listed as not recommended. Is
That's
that
true.
correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So there are folks who just choose not to participate in it. You know, I would say almost like at their peril, because that bar's rating has become so important to a lot of voters in Philadelphia. And so if you choose not to participate in it, like people know you're listed as not recommended.
Mhm.
Most people do participate, I would say.
Yeah. Good for me to do common pleas.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so we're moving up our judicial pyramid, Court of Common Pleas. This is our general trial court. It has 101 judges. This one's divided into the trial division, that's the felonies there, and the major civil cases. Then I always remember the Court of Common Pleas because these are the courtrooms you might hear the word please the most because it's family court. Like I just need these mnemonics when I'm telling people things for them, but these are serious issues of custody, domestic violence, adoptions. Like these are major life altering cases. And again, correct me if I'm misspeaking, but I believe that most cases in Philly, like they end at these two levels, municipal and common pleas. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
accurate?
yeah.
Most people don't appeal
Right.
their cases. And so here in Philly, while we are voting for judges, it's so important that we make sure that we are knowledgeable of who these judges are and that we vote our values since they have such an immediate impact because it's here in Philadelphia. They are serious decisions that people are making, and this could be like the one and done.
Yeah.
There's also orphans court, which is also really important too when we think about people who have estates and there's disputes and there's wills and guardianships. So again, just like with the municipal court, there are only Democratic candidates. So our Republican voters won't see candidates for this one. And we're voting for up to 9. So besides using the Philly Bar's recommendations for the Court of Common Pleas, is there anything else we should know as voters as we try to learn about these judges or potential judges?
Yeah, the Philly Bar Guide is like the the most useful tool, I'll say. But sometimes you want to know some more specifics about like your neighbors, right? Like what are your committee people or your local ward that you live in, where are they? So like going to their website is a useful, or their Facebook, they'll often list, like I live in the 8th, you can go to their Twitter and see who they've endorsed and recommended.
Mhm.
They're often different from the Bar Association's review, right? Different perspectives, different goals. The Democratic City Committee for Democratic candidates put out this year, I think it's phillyjudges.com, which is a pretty simple website. But what it does is it pulls a lot of this stuff together. So it'll list like, were they endorsed by the city committee? Do they have ward endorsements? And what is the Bar Association's review?
Nice.
So it's a
That's great.
new tool. Micah Majubian, who's I don't know, I think he's a volunteer, put this thing together and shared it. And I was like, oh, it's cool because it pulls all these things, and it links to like their Facebook or their Twitter as well if the campaign has one. So it's a useful tool. I think it's
And that again, it's phillyjudges.com.
phillyjudges.com. Yep.
Love that. Yeah, that is
Triple check that.
I
I
will definitely be sharing that.
Yeah, phillyjudges.com. So you can see your candidates there. Now, I have not verified every piece of data on there, but I have spot checked it for like the bar association level. But I think it's a useful tool.
And that in combination, of course, with ours, if people know our interactive voter guide, which is ballot.70.org, where we have information to help you learn more about the judges. The last judges that we have are the statewide courts. So we have the two appellate courts. There's Superior Court that hears civil and criminal cases, and the Commonwealth Court that hears cases involving state agencies and public law.
Yep.
Okay.
And Commonwealth Court isn't always an appellate court.
Oh, that's so helpful.
Distinction. So there are cases that originate within the Commonwealth Court.
Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's really helpful because I always just add those two. The other piece that I usually share with voters is that these are three judge panels. And so knowing a bit about the makeup of these could be important to people. So right now there are vacancies in both, but for very different reasons. Could you help us differentiate the courts just a little bit and then tell us what led to each having an open spot?
Sure. So if you go through a trial at municipal or common pleas court here in Philadelphia and you don't like the outcome, and you appeal that decision, that's how we get into the Superior Court, right? So that's your first appeal that goes to Superior Court. I think we see that a lot on Law and Order. They bring Law and Order where a decision is being appealed. So that's a really important court, and like it's a statewide court. Commonwealth Court is a little bit different, but we actually see a lot of cases related to elections stuff end up in Commonwealth Court. Sometimes it starts there, sometimes it ends up there. Most states don't have this Commonwealth Court piece. It's like a Pennsylvania specific structure in some ways, in part because it's called Commonwealth and most states aren't Commonwealths, but also because like it's just a unique thing in our judicial structure. But these people have deep expertise in like how government operates. So it's a little bit different than the traditional like appellate court, which would be the Superior Court. I apologize. I should know this. I know a lot of things. I don't quite know all things. Getting there though. I cannot remember the specifics of how these vacancies came. You probably do.
I think with Commonwealth, that one is a retirement.
Yep. So judges have a mandatory retirement age here in Pennsylvania, which is an important thing to note.
Yeah, that one is a retirement. I know because I gave that presentation in front of her son. Unwittingly. And then I was like, oh, great. Help me out with some more about the Commonwealth Court. So that was lovely. And then is our newest Supreme Court judge from the Supreme Court.
Yep. And that's like pretty common. Just like you'll see a case move up, you'll also see judges move up. So one of the candidates for Superior Court, I apologize, Judge Tsai, I can't remember if she's running for Superior or Commonwealth.
She's running for Commonwealth.
Commonwealth Court. So she's currently a Court of Common Pleas judge here in Philadelphia, right? So judges will often move up within these structures over time as well.
And then I believe it's Brandon Newman, who is the Democratic candidate for the Superior Court. So for these courts, our Republican voters will have options. I believe there's two for each Superior Court and Commonwealth, and then there's one Democratic candidate for those.
I do have one important note here. If you are looking for judicial ratings for these statewide courts, the Philadelphia Bar Association doesn't review all appellate court or state court judges. They review candidates for those courts who are from Philadelphia, right? So you may need to go to the State Bar Association, Pennsylvania Bar Association, to get their rating, because there may be candidates who are from other parts of the Commonwealth who aren't going to appear before the Philadelphia Bar Association. It's a odd structure that I actually don't love, but it's important. So you may need to go to the Philadelphia Bar Association. I'm sorry, the Pennsylvania Bar Association
Mhm.
website to look at those candidates' ratings.
But they have the same, is it the same
Same
structure?
structure, like
Okay,
recommended, not recommended, and they do a very similar evaluation based on a lot of the same standards.
nice. Yeah, because that was gonna be my next one. The standards are so high and so thorough. I love it. You know, I love a checklist and all of those things. Speaking of our checklist, I do want to mention the election board races and then just check the chat. It's 28. Do
Yep.
you have like 5 more
Of
minutes?
course.
Okay. Because I want to talk about my race.
I was gonna say, like, yeah, Nisha should just handle this on her own.
So election board races, in essence, like for a time, I will go through
Yeah.
each one, and that way, if people have questions that they want to ask Andrew, drop them in the chat. I know that someone who couldn't be here today had sent a question,
Great.
so I'll have that to share. But election board races, the election board is the fancy name that we give to poll workers. Not all of our poll workers are volunteers. The judge of election and our inspectors, so the inspectors are the ones that you definitely know who they are here in Philadelphia. They are the ones with the e-poll books. For our friends who might be in the collar counties tuning in, they're the ones that have the regular bugs. They're the people checking you in, the inspectors. So both judge of election, who kind of handles the whole day, oversees everything, works with any of the issues that may arise if someone wants to turn in their mail-in ballot and like go and vote on the machine instead, or if there is an issue and someone needs to spoil their ballot, someone needs assistance wants to bring assistance into the voting booth. The judge of election handles all of those. And then you have the inspectors. Those are 2 elected positions. And you're going to see those on your ballot. So people like me get to, like every 4 years, vote for themselves. It's so super fun. And you might see some names that are familiar to you, and they're your lovely poll workers who are there. Now you will see because this is a primary, and in PA we have a closed primary, you will only see Democratic candidates for judge of election, inspector. On If you're a Democrat, you'll only see the Republicans on those, but you will see them again in the general and be able to vote for whomever. Now, I say that in order to say that our role as poll workers on election day is nonpartisan. Like we are voted in by party, but we truly are there to serve every single voter and to make sure that maybe my dream of like having a voting holiday, like election day holiday, is my big goal. I dream big, Andrew. I dream big, but I'd love to make sure that everyone who wants to vote has the opportunity to, and that is what all poll workers are there for. So if you see those down at the bottom, definitely make sure to vote for them. We definitely work hard. We're really excited. And if you don't have a lot of poll workers at your polling places, make sure to volunteer. Here in the city, we need 8,500 poll workers. There is always a shortage. So we love people who volunteer. That's when you're appointed. We love people who are elected. That's every 4 years. Those you cannot learn about. So those candidates, because there are so many, we don't have those on our interactive voter guide, but you can learn more about who is running at the Philadelphia Commissioners. So if you go to vote.phila.gov, where you can learn about all the candidates for office, you can also, all the way at the bottom, you'll see there's a whole spreadsheet of all of the people who are running, both the Democrats and Republicans. So that is my spiel about the local election board. I don't see anything in the chat. Do you mind if I just ask you the question that
Oh,
was
sure.
in? Okay.
Of
Gotta
course.
pull that up. Um, I feel like we did, oh, they sent me three. So one says the ballot question seems straightforward, but are there any long-term implications, financial or political, that voters should consider before voting? I feel like we covered
Yeah,
that
we
one.
covered that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Next one, I usually vote in judicial races, but it's still hard to differentiate between candidates. Aside from the Bar Association rating, are there other signals or red flags I should look for? I think your phillyjudges.com really helped with knowing in terms of voting your values, getting your
Yeah.
recommendations from your board leaders. Like
And you
that.
can also see like other I should have noted this earlier, like other elected officials who have endorsed the candidate, as well as like if a union or a community organization. So like the Liberty City Democrats, if they've endorsed the candidate, you can see that also on that website.
Mhm.
A lot of these candidates don't have websites because it's like a smaller race
Mhm.
in some ways. So it is difficult to get information. So I do appreciate the city committee putting that together.
Yeah. And then the last one, oh, this is a good one. Okay. This one I like. I should have just done this one, but I wanted to do, I promised to give them all. Are we expecting any changes in voter turnout for this primary compared to past municipal primaries? And what does this say about voter engagement in Philly right now? Ooh.
Ooh, I hate to
That's
say it.
heavy. That's
I
heavy. I'm
know.
sorry.
I feel like we're gonna see a low turnout race.
Mhm.
Looking back to the first time District Attorney Krasner ran, there was a pretty crowded field for DA. That was like
Mhm.
a lot of engagement there. Similarly, when Rebecca Reinhardt ran for the first time, she was challenging an incumbent. So I feel like there was a lot of interest in that race. Um, you know, be, it seems like it's been quieter to me. Uh,
Mhm.
I know that some ads are up on TV, and I do think that's going to increase turnout a bit. But what does it say? I think it says a couple of things. I think it says in some ways people are okay with the status quo, right? If you're not showing up to vote, you're expressing that. That is a
Mhm.
choice you're making. And I think otherwise it's this ongoing challenge of these like what we would say like non-major election years, right? It's not a presidential year.
Mhm.
But we all know, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here with Committee of 70 members, like how
Mhm.
important these local races are and how in so many ways they impact your life more directly than the president of the United States ever will.
Mhm.
So it's such an important race. It's a little frustrating, but we're going to continue to work with our organization with partners to get turnout up in these races and help people understand why these things are so important.
And that's why we depend on our members to come to events, to ask us questions, to watch these, even if this is, if someone's watching this from YouTube when I post this early next week, we definitely depend on our members to share information as trusted messengers. So many of us have people who go, who should I vote for? Like,
Right.
give me the lowdown, like, just break it down to me. And so, thank you so much for being that trusted messenger and getting to those people for us. We definitely cannot do this alone. Thank you so much. Do you mind if I just run through the last, like, make a voting plan and then send people on their way to dinner?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, one thing on the make a voting plan is some of you may be wondering, where is my mail-in ballot? I applied for
Oh,
it. It hasn't come in yet. It should be here today or tomorrow, I would say, based on my conversation with the city commissioners. But the ballot was delayed significantly because a candidate was running for, they were both on the municipal court and court of common pleas ballot. And they went through the appellate process ultimately because there was a residency challenge.
Mhm.
So the city couldn't send out the ballots until they knew who was supposed to be on the ballot. So on Monday, they sent out the ballot, which included the candidate's name. His name's Mike Huff. And I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the appeal went all the way to the Supreme Court, actually twice, said no, he's not on the ballot anymore. So that
Mhm.
ballot was sent out on Monday. His name is listed on it. He cannot win ultimately.
Mhm. So people will see him, but regardless of the count, he cannot win.
He cannot win.
Okay, that is very helpful to know, to hear that someone can't be on the ballot when they are on the ballot.
Yep. Yep. That delayed everything. You know, our commissioners were trying to get that done as quickly as possible, but that definitely delayed everything.
Yeah. That is also nice too to say like that they definitely were trying. I know for myself, I was talking to deputy commissioner last week because our members were like, where is my ballot?
Yeah.
And they're like, we're hoping, any day now. All right, so that is wonderful. That brings us to the deadline to request the mail-in ballot. If people are interested in doing that, the deadline is next Tuesday, May 13th by 5 p.m. If you are going to a satellite election office here in the city, we have 10 of those. So in addition to the office that's right there at City Hall, you can go to any of the 10. So if you, like me, live in South Philly, but maybe you teach up at Temple, you can use Temple Satellite Election Office. They are open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and will also be open Saturday and Sundays, 10 to 4. And they are great. You can do everything there. So if you know someone who needs to maybe get a replacement ballot. If you want to ask a question about filling out the ballot, you can fill it all, you can request it up until 5 p.m. We always suggest that you go as early as possible. On the website for the Philly commissioners, they've said that they want to start want to start letting people in about 4:30 so they can get through the whole process. So try and get there as early as possible to request your mail-in ballot. But you can do all those things and then you'll drop them off if you're ready to vote. If you've used ballot.70.org to kind of plan your whole vote, you can drop those in the mail-in drop box. So that is my plug for the satellite election offices. I know the commissioners are also planning a party at the offices this Saturday from 10 to 4. That is all 10. They want to make sure that people know they're still there. A lot of people were there in the fall. They're still open. So you can use those. Of course, Election Day is Tuesday, May 20th. If you're still interested in being a poll worker, we can always use those. So if you go to 70, you can learn more about becoming a poll worker. And then just thank you again for spending your evening with us and for being voters. We absolutely appreciate you and the fact that you're committed to shaping the future of our city. Hopefully, we've given you a bit more information. And then you can share that with your friends, family, loved one, whether it's on a South Philly stoop like me or a beautiful porch out in West Philly, wherever you are. Please have these conversations with people, and we hope to see you at the polls. Thank you
Thanks.
all so much.
See you soon, everyone.
All right, bye.